Sarah Thompson woke to the familiar shrill of her alarm, the orange glow of dawn seeping through the blinds. The day felt no different than any other cold coffee, the clatter of her boots on the wooden floor, and the endless checklist of morning routines. Yet, as she dressed in her crisp army uniform, there was a small flutter of anticipation she couldn't quite name. It wasn't fear or excitement. It was more subtle, like the quiet hum of potential waiting somewhere, just beyond the horizon. She adjusted her cap, double-checked the polished insignia on her shoulders, and left the barracks, boots clicking on the concrete path. The Fort Beaver gates loomed ahead, a constant, unchanging sentinel that had witnessed countless soldiers pass through its iron bars. For most, the gate was nothing more than a checkpoint, a minor annoyance on their way to training grounds, offices, or distant postings. But for Sarah, the gate represented responsibility, vigilance, and the invisible thread connecting her to every soldier on base. She had worked here for nearly 3 years, and in that time, she had seen countless vehicles, ranks, and faces. She had waved away impatient honks, endured the grumbles of late arrivals, and endured the occasional outburst from stressed officers. Yet every ID checked, every vehicle inspected, reinforced her belief. Her work mattered. The air was crisp, tinged with the earthy scent of dew on the grass, carrying the faint aroma of diesel from early morning supply trucks. Sarah inhaled deeply, savoring the stillness that preceded the day's chaos. The sun crept slowly, bathing the base in golden light, reflecting off the black asphalt and glinting against the chrome of passing vehicles. Each sound was magnified in the quiet, the hum of a generator, the distant bark of a military working dog, the rhythmic footsteps of soldiers on morning drills. Sarah felt alive in that moment, as though the world had distilled itself into the rhythm of her work. She glanced around at her fellow guards. Most were lost in routine, scanning IDs with a mechanical gaze or tapping on their tablets without thought. A few nodded absently as vehicles passed, their minds seemingly elsewhere. Sarah, in contrast, approached every person with focus, treating each interaction as though it could be significant. She had learned the importance of small details, the hesitation in a driver's voice, the way a hand trembled when holding paperwork, the subtle cues that something was off. It was a game of vas-y, observation and instinct, a skill she had honed with patience and discipline. She believed in vigilance, not just as a duty, but as an art. A convoy of trucks rumbled in the distance, shaking the ground underfoot. Sarah moved to the center of the gate, adjusting the height of the barrier arm. She scanned the vehicles as they approached, logging license plates with the practiced ease of someone who had done this 1,000 times. The soldiers inside nodded politely, some smiling briefly, some offering curt greetings, all part of the daily ritual. Sarah returned. The gestures, her face a calm mask over the careful calculations running through her mind. She was aware that any mistake could have consequences, no matter how small, and she took the weight of her responsibility seriously. Even in this ordinary routine, Sarah found moments of quiet connection. A young private, nervous on his first day, hesitated while fumbling for his ID. She smiled gently, reassuring him without words, guiding him through the process. His relief was palpable, and he nodded with gratitude before proceeding. Small victories like this reminded her why she valued her position. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't heroic in the traditional sense, but it mattered. Every soldier who passed through that gate relied on her vigilance. Every vehicle she inspected was a shield against potential chaos. She carried her duty like a quiet armor, invisible to most, but essential. As the morning progressed, the rhythm of the base unfolded around her, the low hum of engines, the shuffle of boots on asphalt, the distant shouts of instructors. Each sound was familiar, comforting even. Yet amid the ordinary, there was always the chance of the extraordinary. Sarah had learned to expect nothing, and yet be ready for anything. It was a paradox, but one she embraced. A visitor could arrive. At any moment, a high-ranking officer, a civilian VIP, or even someone from outside the military entirely. Each presented a different test, a different challenge, and each required the same precision and calm she had cultivated over years. She checked her watch, 6:45. Most personnel had arrived, and the base was settling into its routine rhythm. Yet Sarah's senses remained sharp, trained to notice even the smallest anomalies. A truck slightly off course, a uniform misaligned. A glance too long or too short, all were clues she could not ignore. She moved with quiet authority, her posture firm, her eyes scanning, her mind alert. Each gesture, each motion was precise, a reflection of the discipline instilled in her during basic training. She was invisible to many, but to those who needed the gate to be secure, she was indispensable. Her thoughts drifted briefly to the personal sacrifices behind this role. She had left family dinners, birthdays, and holidays to serve her post with unwavering dedication. There were lonely nights when the base seemed like a world unto itself, and yet she had chosen this life because she believed in purpose, in duty, and in the integrity of her role. She reminded herself daily that respect was earned, not given, and that even in the shadows of routine, excellence was visible to those who truly noticed. It was in this quiet, methodical state of awareness that Sarah first noticed something unusual on the horizon. Amid the steady stream of standard vehicles, a black SUV appeared, moving with deliberate precision. Unlike the other cars, it carried an aura of importance, its engine hummed steady, almost commanding. Sarah's pulse quickened, not with fear, but with the anticipation of something significant. She instinctively moved to her post, hands steady on the ID scanner, eyes sharp, mind racing through every protocol she had memorized. This was no ordinary arrival. The SUV slowed as it neared the gate. Sarah's training kicked in fully. Posture rigid, gaze unwavering, hands ready. She recognized the nameplate inside. Commander Jason Mills, a Navy SEAL with a reputation that preceded him. His operations had been classified, legendary, and often the subject of hushed conversations on base. Her heart beat faster, but her exterior remained calm, professional. This was a test, though she didn't yet realize it. The commander's presence radiated authority and quiet power, and for the first time that morning, Sarah felt the weight of history brush against the routine of her post. The convoy continued, vehicles flanking the SUV, but all eyes were on the central figure. Sarah maintained her focus, scanning identification with impeccable precision. Every movement mattered. Every interaction was a reflection of her competence. She knew she couldn't falter, not for the commander, not for anyone. She repeated the protocols internally, silently reminding herself. Check, confirm, log, repeat. It was the rhythm of her life, and it was about to intersect with something extraordinary. As the black SUV rolled to a stop in front of the gate, Sarah's attention sharpened. Commander Mills emerged with a measured stride, his presence commanding, yet not arrogant. His eyes scanned the surroundings, pausing briefly on her. There was a weight in his gaze, a subtle recognition of authority in her posture. Sarah felt a mixture of awe and focus, the kind that transformed routine into purpose. Today, her ordinary role would become extraordinary, not through chance, but through the skill, precision, and calm she carried like armor. The morning air held its breath. Sarah Thompson, the quiet gate guard who had once thought herself invisible, was about to step into a moment that would define her career. Her mind cleared, her senses sharpened, and her heart beat with measured anticipation. The gate she had guarded for years was no longer just a checkpoint. It was the stage where diligence, discipline, and quiet competence would meet recognition, and where the routine might finally yield the extraordinary. The black SUV moved slowly, almost deliberately, as if the vehicle itself understood the gravity of the moment. Sarah Thompson's fingers rested lightly on the scanner, but her eyes never left the approaching car. The morning light caught this polished paint glinting along the contours of the vehicle. It wasn't just any car. It had a presence, an authority that seemed to command the air around it. For a moment, Sarah paused in her routine, heart quickening not with fear, but with a focused awareness that something significant was unfolding. She had learned long ago that in her line of work, attention to detail was everything. A slight deviation in a driver's movement, a hesitation in handing over credentials, or even a glance too long or too short could signal something important. She scanned the SUV for any anomalies, but the exterior gave nothing away. It was immaculate, well-maintained, and guarded by two accompanying vehicles, flanking it with military precision. Her mind catalogued every detail, the slight rumble of the engine, the precise alignment of the tires, the uniformed presence of each driver and attendant. As the SUV slowed, Sarah's training took over. She straightened her posture, hands poised on her scanner, voice steady and professional. "Good morning. May I see your identification, please?" She called out, though her tone carried a subtle tremor beneath the professionalism. She didn't want to betray her surprise, even though she had recognized the nameplate from base briefings. Commander Jason Mills. SEAL. Decorated. Legendary. She had studied his career in briefings and news reports, memorized the few public details of his missions, and admired the discipline that seemed to radiate from him, even through screens and photos. Now he was here, at her gate, and it was her responsibility to perform flawlessly. The driver of the SUV handed over a folder carefully, sliding it across the dashboard to Sarah without breaking eye contact. She received it, scanning the credentials with meticulous care. Every number, every seal, every signature was verified according to protocol. She logged the information, her mind racing even as her exterior remained calm. She knew that appearances mattered as much as action. To anyone observing, she was just another gate guard performing her duties. But to herself, and perhaps now to the commander, this was the culmination of years of discipline and dedication. The SUV remained still, its occupants quiet. Sarah noticed a subtle tension in the air, an almost imperceptible acknowledgement that this was not a routine inspection. Her colleagues had paused at their own posts, peering curiously at the black SUV and its mysterious passengers. Whispers ran like electricity through the small clusters of guards. "Is that? No way? Mills is here?" Sarah ignored the murmurs, focusing entirely on her procedure. She had learned that distractions, however tempting, could compromise performance. She breathed evenly, grounding herself in the rhythm of her work. Check, confirm, log, repeat. Commander Mills stepped out of the SUV, moving with a fluidity that was both commanding and understated. Each movement was deliberate, a study in precision and control. Sarah noted his posture, the way his shoulders squared instinctively, and how his gaze swept the area with quiet authority. He was larger than she imagined, but not intimidating more, imposing in the sense that his presence demanded attention and respect. Every detail of his demeanor conveyed confidence, competence, and experience. He was not just an officer. He was a professional at the apex of his field, and he had come to her gate. For a fleeting moment, Sarah felt an odd mixture of awe and clarity. Here was someone who had faced dangers she could barely imagine, someone whose decisions had saved lives in distant lands. Yet here he was, subjected to the same protocols she had enforced for years. The thought was grounding. Despite his accomplishments, the rules applied to him just as they did to any soldier, any visitor, any civilian on the base. That realization bolstered her confidence. This wasn't about intimidation. It was about competence. Her competence. And she would not falter. Mills approached slowly, his gaze never leaving hers. He seemed to study her, not in judgment, but in quiet observation, as if he were weighing her skill against an unspoken standard. Sarah felt the weight of his attention, but instead of fear, she felt a surge of focus. She moved methodically through the protocols, confirming IDs, logging information, and maintaining composure. Every movement, every word was deliberate. Her heart raced, but she controlled it, channeling it into precision. This was no longer just a routine morning. This was a test of professionalism at the highest level. The SUV's passengers remained silent, a contrast to the occasional murmurs of nearby guards. It created an almost cinematic tension, the stillness of the black vehicle, the methodical movements of Sarah, the deliberate approach of Mills. Sarah felt as if time had slowed. Each second was elongated, each sound amplified. The click of her boots, the soft hum of the engine, the faint rustle of the wind through nearby trees. She was hyper-aware, attuned to every detail, yet calm in her execution. Every action was deliberate, measured, precise. When Mills reached the checkpoint, he stopped just a few feet away. His eyes, sharp and discerning, examined her posture, her precision, her every movement. Sarah did not flinch. She met his gaze steadily, aware that her composure was as important as her actions. She handed him the completed logs, maintaining eye contact, and waited. For a long moment, neither spoke. The silence was not uncomfortable. It was charged, electric, filled with an unspoken understanding. Here was a professional acknowledging another professional, each respecting the discipline and rigor of the other. Mills nodded subtly, acknowledging her meticulous work. Sarah noted a slight smile at the corner of his lips, fleeting but genuine. In that moment, she felt a quiet validation. The years of routine, the long shifts, the invisible labor, all of it had led to this recognition, unspoken but unmistakable. Her heart swelled, a mix of pride, relief, and exhilaration. She realized that sometimes acknowledgement came in the smallest gestures, and that her attention to detail had not gone unnoticed. The convoy continued to wait, their engines humming quietly, but the focus was entirely on Sarah and the commander. She guided him through the remaining protocols, each step carried out with precision and care. Mills observed without interruption, his presence commanding yet unobtrusive. She noticed subtle shifts in his posture, the way he evaluated each action, the way he seemed to measure professionalism against experience. It was a rare and humbling experience to be scrutinized by someone of such renown and yet feel empowered, rather than intimidated. As the last verification was complete, Mills stepped back, his gaze lingering for a moment longer. Sarah felt a profound mixture of emotions: pride, validation, and the thrill of recognition. She had performed flawlessly, not for accolades, but because she understood the importance of her role. And now, she realized, her work had intersected with someone whose accomplishments she had long admired. This was not luck. This was preparation. Meeting opportunity, skill meeting acknowledgement. Her role as a gate guard, often overlooked, had become the focal point of professional respect. Finally, Mills lifted his hand in a crisp, precise salute. Sarah froze, stunned. It was more than a gesture. It was recognition, respect, and validation, all rolled into one. Her heart raced, a mixture of disbelief and pride flooding her senses. She returned the salute instinctively, mirroring the precision, aware that this moment was singular in her career. The silence that followed was profound, charged with meaning. The legendary SEAL had acknowledged her work, and in doing so, transformed her understanding of duty. discipline, and recognition. The black SUV remained briefly, a silent observer of the exchange. Then, with the same deliberate motion that had brought it to her gate, it continued through, leaving Sarah standing tall, her mind racing yet grounded. She realized that her life had shifted in an instant, not through luck, not through circumstance, but through steadfast professionalism. She had been tested, observed, and validated, and the memory would linger, a quiet beacon of pride and possibility. Sarah exhaled slowly, her pulse gradually returning to normal. Around her, the bass resumed its rhythm, the routine noise returning. Yet she was changed. The black SUV, the commander, and the unspoken acknowledgement had transformed her morning into something extraordinary. She returned to her post, scanning the next vehicle with the same meticulous care, but now with a sense of quiet empowerment. Today had reminded her that even the smallest roles could intersect with greatness, and that recognition often arrived in unexpected, unforgettable ways. The morning air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of dew on the grass and the distant hum of engines from supply trucks entering the base. Sarah Thompson's eyes, sharp and alert, scanned the perimeter as she performed her routine checks. Vehicles came and went in predictable streams, soldiers nodded politely, and paperwork shuffled under the fingers of guards who, like her, had fallen into the rhythm of monotony. It was all familiar, all controlled, but something in the distance made her pause. A black SUV appeared on the horizon, moving deliberately, almost as if it were aware of the importance of its arrival. It was sleek, polished, and exuded authority even from a distance. Her pulse quickened, not with fear, but with that instinctive awareness she had honed over years at the gate. Something significant was approaching. The base was calm, the usual morning bustle muted, yet the SUV seemed to carry an invisible weight, a silent command of attention. Sarah adjusted her posture, hands steady on her scanner, eyes tracking the vehicle with precision. The surrounding guards noticed too, some whispering, some curious, others skeptical, but she remained focused. She had learned early in her career that distractions could be costly. Every detail mattered, the alignment of the tires, the cadence of the engine, the way the vehicle approached the barrier. She noted the precision with which the SUV moved, its synchronization with the accompanying convoy. This was no ordinary vehicle. Her training guided her through the protocols instinctively. She stepped forward, voice steady, tone professional. "Good morning. Identification, please." Her hands were calm, scanning each document as it was handed over. As she examined the credentials, her heart quickened. The nameplate inside the SUV read, Commander Jason Mills, Navy, SEAL, decorated, legendary. A name that carried both respect and awe. Sarah's fingers lingered momentarily on the folder, absorbing the weight of the responsibility. She knew she had to be flawless. One misstep, one hesitation, and the moment could be compromised. The SUV slowed further, the driver's movements precise, deliberate. Sarah noted the meticulous care in every gesture. This wasn't arrogance or impatience. It was the discipline of someone trained to execute every action perfectly. Commander Mills emerged from the vehicle, moving with a confidence that commanded attention yet radiated calm. His eyes scanned the surroundings, briefly meeting Sarah's gaze. There was no hostility, no scrutiny in the usual sense, just a quiet assessment. He was measuring her professionalism, her composure, her ability to handle the unexpected. Sarah felt the familiar tension of responsibility sharpen her senses. Her training, her experience, and her attention to detail converged into a single focus. Perform every protocol flawlessly. She handed back the completed logs, guiding Mills through the necessary steps with calm authority. Each motion was deliberate, precise, a reflection of years spent at this gate. Though the commander was a figure of immense reputation, Sarah treated him as she would any officer entering the base, with respect, diligence, and unwavering professionalism. For a fleeting moment, time seemed suspended. The SUV and its occupants waited silently behind Mills, a quiet entourage of precision and discipline. Other guards watched from their posts, whispers rippling through the air. "Is that Mills? No way. He's here?" Sarah ignored them, centering herself on the task at hand. She reminded herself of the rules, the protocols, the training that had made her competent in this role. Recognition, she knew, would come not from words, but from flawless execution. Mills continued his inspection silently, observing every action. Sarah maintained her composure, aware of the scrutiny, yet refusing to let it shake her confidence. The rhythm of her duties, scan, verify, log, repeat, became a quiet shield against the tension in the air. Each step was executed methodically, every gesture precise. She felt the weight of responsibility, yet also the thrill of being noticed, of her competence intersecting with someone extraordinary. It was a delicate balance: humility in service, excellence in execution, and awareness of the moment. The convoy remained in the background, engines humming, vehicles aligned with military precision. Yet all attention seemed drawn to the interaction at the gate. Sarah noted every detail: the commander's calm demeanor, the subtle nods he gave as she completed each step, the way his eyes lingered on her posture, her precision. There was no hurry, no impatience, only observation and recognition of skill. Sarah felt a quiet surge of pride. She realized that this moment, though brief, had significance beyond the routine. It was a meeting of professionalism across ranks, a silent acknowledgement of competence. As the final verification was completed, Mills paused, his gaze lingering. Sarah could feel the weight of his attention, yet she stood firm, unwavering. It was as if he were assessing not just her actions, but her character, her discipline, her dedication to duty. For years, she had believed her work was invisible, a routine necessity overlooked by others. Now, she realized that excellence, however quiet or humble, was visible to those who truly understood its value. Then, without warning, Mills lifted his hand in a precise, crisp salute. Sarah froze, caught between surprise and instinctive response. Her heart pounded, disbelief and pride mingling in equal measure. A Navy SEAL commander, someone whose reputation she had long admired, had acknowledged her professionalism in a single, powerful gesture. She mirrored the salute instinctively, returning the respect with equal precision. The moment hung in the air, charged with significance, unspoken, yet unmistakable. Recognition had arrived, and it was more profound than words could convey. The black SUV remained stationary, a silent sentinel observing the exchange. As surrounding guards had gone quiet, watching with awe as the legendary figure saluted the gate guard who had, until this moment, seemed ordinary. Sarah's mind raced, absorbing the meaning of what had just happened. Her years of meticulous attention, her unwavering focus, her quiet dedication, all had culminated in this moment of acknowledgement. It was validation not through words, but through gesture, the language of respect and professionalism shared between two warriors. As the SUV and its convoy finally moved through the gate, the air seemed to shift. The hum of engines, the shuffle of boots, the distant calls of the base resumed, yet Sarah felt a transformation within herself. The routine of her post, once mundane, now carried weight. Her role was significant, her diligence recognized, and her competence validated. She exhaled slowly, letting the tension drain, yet feeling energized in a way she had never experienced before. Today, her invisible work had intersected with greatness, and she understood that her dedication had mattered more than ever. Sarah returned to her post, scanning the next vehicle with the same methodical precision, yet now with a quiet confidence. The morning sun climbed higher, casting long shadows over the base, but nothing felt ordinary anymore. Every ID she checked, every vehicle she logged, was imbued with a sense of purpose. She had been tested in an unexpected way and had passed. The black SUV, Commander Mills, and the unspoken acknowledgement had left a lasting impression, one she knew would resonate in her mind for years to come. Even as the convoy disappeared from sight, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling of exhilaration. She reflected on the silent weight of recognition, the profound simplicity of a salute, and the way competence could command respect without a single word. For a moment, she allowed herself to savor the feeling, not prideful, but quietly assured, strengthened by the knowledge that her diligence, focus, and professionalism had been acknowledged by someone extraordinary. By the time the morning shift settled back into rhythm, Sarah Thompson had experienced something rare, a validation that transcended rank, reputation, or visibility. She had been noticed for her skill, her discipline, and her quiet dedication. And though the black SUV was gone, the impression remained, etched in her mind as both inspiration and reminder. Every guard at the gate performed a critical role, but Sarah now understood the true weight of hers. Excellence, she realized, is always visible to those who notice. Commander Jason Mills paused at the gate, his boots planted firmly on the asphalt, the morning sun catching the edge of his uniform. Sarah Thompson felt the weight of his gaze before she even realized it. Unlike any other officer she had encountered, Mills didn't just look at her. He observed, assessing everything: posture, poise, precision, even the subtleties in her breathing. His eyes were sharp, calculating, yet there was an unmistakable respect underlying their intensity. For a moment, she felt exposed under that scrutiny, but not threatened. Instead, her focus sharpened. Years of training at Fort Bever had taught Sarah that discipline was visible in the smallest details: the angle of a helmet, the steadiness of hands, the rhythm of gestures. She straightened her shoulders, squared her stance, and adjusted the straps on her gear. Every motion was deliberate. She made sure her movements were calm, controlled, precise. This was more than professionalism. It was performance under observation. And she knew that Mills, with his reputation for exacting standards, would notice even the tiniest lapse. Mills stepped closer, and Sarah's eyes flicked briefly to the identification folder she had already processed. He didn't hand over anything else. He simply let his presence speak. There was no rush, no impatience. Every step he took was measured, deliberate, purposeful. She had seen military figures before, but none carried the quiet authority he did. It wasn't aggression or command. It was an aura of competence, confidence, and absolute control over himself and the situation. Sarah felt the weight of being in the presence of someone who had operated in life-or-death scenarios hundreds of times, whose judgment could literally alter outcomes. The world seemed to narrow around them. The hum of engines, the distant voices of soldiers, the flutter of flags along the base perimeter, all faded into background noise. What remained was the intense, almost tangible connection of observation and counter-observation. Mills watched her, and she instinctively watched him. It was a silent test of skill, awareness, and composure. Sarah had long believed her role at the gate was invisible, a routine function few noticed. Yet now, under the eyes of a man who had faced danger most civilians could never imagine, her work felt magnified, significant in ways she had never experienced. She recalled lessons from her earliest days in training: maintain composure, command, respect through action, and always stay aware. Mills seemed to embody those principles himself. He didn't speak, didn't issue commands, but the gravity of his presence carried lessons in leadership, discipline, and observation. Sarah mirrored that discipline, controlling her breathing, centering herself and executing each gesture with precision. Her hands remained steady as she adjusted the barrier arm, signaling the next vehicle while keeping her gaze fixed. Each action was deliberate, each step a statement of competence. Mills moved with fluidity, his eyes scanning every corner of the checkpoint, every movement of guards, and finally returning to her. It was an unspoken assessment, a quiet acknowledgement of her diligence. Sarah noticed subtle details, the slight narrowing of his eyes, the faint tilt of his head as he measured her posture, the deliberate timing of his gestures. She realized that he wasn't merely observing. He was evaluating, weighing her professionalism against the exacting standards of military precision he embodied. For a moment, Sarah felt the profound responsibility of being seen, not just by rank, but by excellence itself. Time seemed to stretch. The convoy of vehicles behind him waited patiently, engines humming quietly, soldiers in formation, exuding discipline. Sarah, acutely aware of the eyes upon her, maintained flawless execution of her duties. She processed each ID with meticulous care, logged each detail with deliberate accuracy, and performed every motion with the precision that her training demanded. Mills observed silently, his gaze never leaving her. There was no urgency, no impatience, only a profound, almost surgical evaluation of competence. A small bead of sweat traced down Sarah's temple, yet she remained composed. She focused on the rhythm of her task, letting the procedure itself anchor her. Scan, confirm, log, repeat. Every movement, every word, every gesture mattered. And yet, amidst the intensity, she felt something unexpected, a quiet affirmation. Mills's eyes, though scrutinizing, conveyed respect. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but undeniable. He wasn't merely judging. He was acknowledging her skill, her focus, and her unwavering professionalism. For a gate guard, it was a recognition few ever received, and it filled her with a quiet, steady pride. Mills finally stepped closer, closing the distance between them by just a few feet. Sarah remained unmoved, standing firm, maintaining a presence that was calm yet authoritative. She noticed the details, the faint creases of his uniform, the way his eyes scanned her movements, the relaxed steadiness in his posture. He was deliberate, controlled, exacting. It was a study in confidence, competence, and command. She felt her own posture strengthen in response, her movements becoming sharper, more precise, more intentional. This wasn't just about the procedure anymore. It was about presence, professionalism, and mutual acknowledgement. For a long moment, neither spoke. The tension was palpable, but not oppressive. It was charged with meaning, with the silent language of respect, discipline, and observation. Sarah realized she was experiencing something rare, the evaluation of her role by someone whose life had been defined by high-stakes decision-making, someone who understood competence at a fundamental level. And in that silence, she sensed acknowledgement, unspoken affirmation that her diligence, her care, and her professionalism mattered. She reflected on the paradox of her position. Here she was, a gate guard, often overlooked, performing routine duties that many would consider mundane. Yet her work carried immense weight. It protected lives, ensured security, and maintained order. And now, under the gaze of Mills, she understood that significance was not always visible, that excellence, even in small roles, could command respect in profound ways. Her heart swelled with a mixture of humility and pride, tempered by the disciplined calm that had brought her here. Mills finally nodded subtly, almost imperceptibly, as if confirming the assessment she had already felt. It was a gesture of acknowledgement, a quiet recognition of her competence. Sarah held her breath, savoring the moment while remaining composed. She had passed a silent test, one that required no words, no formal commendation, only flawless execution. Under observation, the acknowledgement was immediate, profound, and unforgettable. It wasn't just a salute to her rank or her position. It was a salute to her skill, her dedication, and her professionalism. She allowed herself a brief, private smile. This was what it meant to be seen, truly seen, by someone extraordinary. For years, she had performed her duties with meticulous care, often feeling invisible. Now she realized that excellence never goes unnoticed, even when it feels unremarkable. Mills's gaze, his assessment, and his subtle nod had confirmed that her work mattered, that her diligence could command respect, and that quiet professionalism could leave a lasting impression. The tension began to ease. The convoy behind Mills shifted, engines rumbling quietly, soldiers waiting patiently. Sarah continued to perform her duties, now with a sense of calm confidence. Her movements were still precise, her voice steady, but there was an added energy, a quiet empowerment born from recognition. The gate, once a routine checkpoint, had become a stage for professional validation, a place where discipline, observation, and skill intersected in a moment of significance. As Mills finally moved toward the SUV, the intensity of his gaze remained a lingering presence. Sarah watched him, understanding that the silent communication between them had been profound. The encounter had transformed her perspective on duty, professionalism, and recognition. Her role, once invisible, now carried meaning beyond routine. She realized that sometimes acknowledgement does not require words, medals, or ceremonies. Comes through observation, respect, and the quiet recognition of competence. For a brief moment, Sarah allowed herself to absorb the weight of the experience. Her heart was still racing, but her movements remained precise. The morning sun continued to climb, casting long shadows across the base, yet the encounter left her feeling illuminated. She had been tested by someone extraordinary and had met the standard. Her work, her discipline, and her professionalism had been recognized in a way few ever experience. And in that recognition, she found validation, pride, and inspiration that would stay with her long after the black SUV disappeared from sight. The black SUV paused just beyond the checkpoint, and Sarah Thompson felt the weight of the moment settle over her like a tangible force. Commander Mills stood a few feet away, observing silently, his eyes scanning every detail of her posture, her movements, and the environment around her. Sarah inhaled deeply, letting the rhythm of her breathing anchor her. This was more than a routine ID check. This was a test, not officially written, not verbally stated, but a test nonetheless, of her discipline, focus, and professionalism. Under scrutiny, she positioned herself with deliberate care, shoulders squared, chin level, and hands steady on the scanner. Each movement was controlled, measured, purposeful. Years of training had prepared her for this, yet nothing could simulate the intensity of being watched by a Navy SEAL commander, a man whose presence exuded authority, experience, and absolute competence. Sarah felt the tension in her chest, but channeled it into precision. Every motion had to be deliberate. Every gesture, every word, perfectly executed. The driver handed over the folder once more, and Sarah accepted it with calm professionalism. Her fingers traced the edges of the documents, verifying seals, checking credentials, cross-referencing information she had memorized. Mills' gaze followed each motion, unblinking, analytical. She sensed the mental tally of her actions in his mind: posture, execution, timing, accuracy. She moved slowly enough to be precise, but not so slowly as to appear hesitant. Each action was deliberate, a silent demonstration of competence under pressure. The sun glinted off the polished SUV, reflecting on the metal of her badge and insignia. It was as though the world had slowed, compressing into a singular moment of focus and intent. Sarah's senses were hyper-aware. The slight rustle of papers, the hum of the vehicle, the distant murmur of other guards, even the subtle weight of Mill's gaze. She processed it all without distraction, grounding herself in the rhythm of procedure. Scan, verify, log, repeat. Every step of the protocol became a statement of her ability to perform flawlessly under observation. Mills moved slightly, his presence deliberate, careful, yet commanding. He did not speak, did not issue commands, yet his silent evaluation was palpable. Sarah felt the intensity of the scrutiny, aware that even the smallest misstep could be noted. And yet she felt a strange empowerment in the process. This was a rare moment where her preparation, her diligence, and her professionalism converged in front of someone extraordinary. She realized that mastery is often measured not in accolades, but in the quiet competence displayed when it matters most. Her hands moved methodically, scanning the identification and confirming information with precision. Each entry into the logbook was exact, deliberate, performed without error. Mills observed with the same intensity he had used in missions where mistakes could cost lives. Sarah felt the weight of that knowledge, yet she did not falter. She had trained for years to respond to pressure with calm efficiency, and now the test was real. The stakes were immediate, tangible, and profoundly significant. A bead of sweat formed at her temple, yet she remained composed. Her eyes flicked up briefly to Mills, noting the subtle nod of acknowledgement he offered, almost imperceptible. It was a gesture of recognition, though it carried more weight than words could convey. Sarah understood that he was observing not only her technical skill, but her composure, her ability to maintain professionalism under scrutiny. She straightened, feeling the surge of quiet pride that comes from being evaluated and passing with excellence. Mills stepped closer, and Sarah adjusted her stance slightly, aware of the proximity. Every muscle, every movement was controlled. Her training in posture, in protocol, and in situational awareness converged in these few moments. She realized that precision was not merely about accuracy, it was about presence. Being seen, being recognized, required more than following steps. It required command of oneself, a calm authority in action, and the discipline to maintain focus under scrutiny. She had found herself in the crucible of such a test, and she was rising to meet it. The SUV remained still, an elegant sentinel of authority and patience. The convoy behind it seemed suspended in quiet anticipation, engines humming softly, soldiers waiting with disciplined stillness. All focus was on Sarah, yet she felt no intimidation, only awareness. This was a defining moment, a chance to demonstrate her capability at the highest level of observation. She moved through the remaining procedures with meticulous care, her actions reflecting confidence, expertise, and quiet authority. For a fleeting moment, she caught Mill's gaze directly. There was a subtle weight in it, a recognition of skill that transcended rank or title. She realized that this was not a casual inspection. It was an acknowledgement of her professionalism, her dedication, and her capacity to perform under pressure. She felt a strange surge of empowerment, a quiet affirmation that her work mattered, in ways she had only dreamed of. Years of dedication, years of routine, had culminated in this silent validation. Sarah's hands adjusted the final checks on the barrier, logging the last of the data with deliberate precision. Mills observed silently, his presence commanding yet unobtrusive. She felt the intensity of being evaluated by someone whose decisions had carried lives, whose judgment had dictated the success of missions under extreme circumstances. And yet, she did not falter. Every gesture, every movement, every glance was deliberate, reflecting the culmination of training, discipline, and innate professionalism. The moment stretched, charged with unspoken communication. Mill's eyes, sharp and discerning, conveyed acknowledgement without words. Sarah understood the weight of the gesture. He was not merely observing her actions. He was recognizing her capability, her focus, her mastery of routine performed flawlessly under scrutiny. It was a subtle but profound affirmation, one that carried far more meaning than any formal commendation. Finally, Mills lifted his hand in a precise, crisp salute. Sarah froze, momentarily overwhelmed by disbelief and pride, then returned the gesture instinctively. Her heart raced, but her composure remained intact. This salute, simple yet powerful, was a validation of years of diligence, of countless mornings spent at this gate, performing duties often unseen, often overlooked. It was recognition of excellence in its purest form, conveyed silently, eloquently, and memorably. As the salute ended, Sarah felt a shift within herself. The black SUV remained, a silent observer, its presence commanding yet unobtrusive. The convoy's engines hummed quietly, a gentle reminder that life on the base continued, but the gravity of the moment lingered. She exhaled slowly, grounding herself, aware that her quiet professionalism had been acknowledged by someone extraordinary. She had passed the test of precision, not through luck, but through competence, preparation, and unwavering focus. Mills finally stepped back, nodding subtly, a gesture of acknowledgement that conveyed far more than words could. Sarah felt an immense sense of pride and empowerment, a quiet validation that excellence, no matter how humble the role, commands respect. Her years of dedication, her quiet perseverance, and her commitment to doing her job impeccably had not gone unnoticed. And in that moment, she realized that recognition often comes in the smallest gestures, delivered by those who truly understand skill, discipline, and professionalism. Sarah Thompson's heartbeat echoed in her ears as Commander Mills stepped back slightly, the air between them heavy with unspoken recognition. She had been tested, scrutinized by a man whose career had been defined by precision, discipline, and life-or-death decisions, and she had performed flawlessly. Yet nothing could have prepared her for what came next. Mills raised his hand in a crisp, deliberate salute, his eyes locking onto hers with a weight of respect that transcended rank. Time seemed to slow, every sound of the bass fading into a quiet hum, leaving only the two of them in a suspended, defining moment. The salute was precise, deliberate, and unwavering. It was more than a gesture of courtesy. It was acknowledgement, validation, and a silent statement of professional respect. Sarah's instincts took over. She mirrored the motion, returning the salute with perfect precision. Her pulse surged, a mix of pride, disbelief, and exhilaration flooding her senses. For years, she had worked in relative obscurity, performing duties that most overlooked, that many dismissed as routine. Yet here, under the gaze of someone extraordinary, her work had been recognized for its true value. The intensity of Mill's eyes held her in place, a quiet affirmation that she had earned this acknowledgement through skill, discipline, and unwavering attention to detail. No words were necessary. The salute alone conveyed everything. Sarah felt a strange mix of humility and empowerment. She realized in that moment that recognition does not always come in grand ceremonies or public accolades. Sometimes it comes, quietly, profoundly, through a gesture that speaks volumes. The salute was a testament to her competence, her professionalism, and her dedication. As the moment stretched, Sarah's mind raced, recalling every detail of her morning routine, the countless ID checks, the meticulous logging of credentials, the steady posture she had maintained through monotony. All of it had led to this intersection of preparation and recognition. She remembered the countless times she had felt invisible at the gate, performing the same tasks with unwavering precision, unsure if anyone truly noticed. Now she understood that excellence, even in the smallest roles, does not go unseen. Mill's presence radiated authority, yet there was a warmth beneath it, a recognition not of rank, but of competence. Sarah felt the weight of the moment pressing upon her chest, a mix of awe and validation. She had faced challenges in her career before, but this was different. This was acknowledgement from someone whose life had been defined by mastery, someone who had operated in extreme circumstances, someone whose respect was earned and never given lightly. And she had earned it through diligence, composure, and unwavering focus. The black SUV remained in the background, a silent witness to the interaction. Its presence seemed to amplify the gravity of the moment, a symbol of authority and professionalism. Waiting patiently while the recognition unfolded, Sarah felt a swell of emotion, a quiet pride that was tempered by humility. She realized that this salute was more than just acknowledgement. It was an inspiration, a tangible reminder that her work mattered, that professionalism could transcend routine, and that dedication could command respect in even the most subtle ways. Around them, the base seemed to hold its breath. The hum of engines, the shuffle of feet, the distant bark of dogs, all faded into a muted backdrop. All that existed was the silent dialogue between Sarah and Mills, conveyed through posture, gaze, and the precise gesture of a salute. She had always believed that the gate was a small, overlooked post, a place where effort often went unnoticed. Yet in this singular moment, she felt the full weight of her importance, the significance of her vigilance, and the profound impact of her professionalism. As she lowered her hand, Sarah felt a rush of clarity. The salute had been brief, no more than a few seconds, yet it carried the gravity of hours, months, and years of dedication. She had been seen in a way she never imagined possible, her skill and composure acknowledged by someone extraordinary. It was a moment that would linger in her mind forever, a benchmark of achievement that transcended titles or awards. She realized that the true reward for excellence is recognition, subtle yet powerful, delivered in a way that resonates deeply. Mills nodded ever so slightly, a final, understated gesture confirming the acknowledgement. Sarah returned the nod, her composure intact, though her heart still raced. The exchange was complete, yet its impact reverberated through her very being. For the first time, she understood that validation is not always loud or ceremonial. It can be quiet, intimate, and profound. The salute had communicated respect, trust, and recognition, something no words could match. She exhaled slowly, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. The intense scrutiny of the morning had transformed into quiet pride. She had met the highest standard of observation and passed, not through luck or circumstance, but through skill, focus, and steadfast professionalism. The moment marked a turning point in her understanding of duty, authority, and recognition. She realized that even in the most routine roles, excellence is visible to those who notice, and respect can be earned quietly, yet profoundly. As the SUV began to move forward, the convoy falling back into formation behind it, Sarah felt an unexpected warmth in her chest. She had been acknowledged in a way few ever experience. A Navy SEAL commander had saluted her, and she had returned it, with confidence and precision. She felt a mixture of pride, humility, and empowerment, a deep understanding that her dedication mattered. The moment had been fleeting, yet its impact was immeasurable. Sarah returned to her post, scanning the next vehicle with the same meticulous care as before, yet now with a renewed sense of purpose. Every ID check, every logged credential, every gesture carried more weight. She felt empowered by the acknowledgement she had received, aware that her professionalism had been tested and affirmed. Her routine, once mundane, now carried significance. The morning sun climbed higher, casting light over the base, and she felt illuminated not just by sunlight, but by the validation of her competence. She reflected on the significance of the salute. It was more than a military formality. It was recognition of skill, diligence, and professionalism. Sarah understood that this was not about ego or personal pride. It was about being seen, understood, and valued for one's competence. For years, she had believed her work at the gate was invisible. Now she knew that excellence, no matter how quiet or unassuming, could command respect in the most profound ways. As the convoy disappeared from sight, Sarah felt a sense of quiet, fulfillment. The moment had passed, but its resonance remained. She had been tested, evaluated, and recognized, and the acknowledgement had been delivered in the simplest, yet most meaningful way, a salute. She knew she would carry this memory with her for years, a benchmark of professionalism, dedication, and the power of being truly seen. In the hours that followed, Sarah returned to her duties with the same precision as always, but now with an A. Sense of quiet confidence. She realized that her work mattered, not just to herself, but to those whose lives and safety depended on her vigilance. The salute had transformed a routine morning into a profound moment of recognition, teaching her that even the smallest roles can intersect with greatness. The black SUV and its convoy had long disappeared beyond the checkpoint, yet the echoes of that morning lingered, subtle but unmistakable. Sarah Thompson stood at her post, her fingers resting lightly on the scanner, yet her mind was still alive. With the memory of Commander Mills' salute, the air seemed charged, as though the base itself had absorbed the gravity of the interaction and was now holding its breath. Every passing vehicle, every soldier walking past, seemed sharper, more vivid, as if the mundane rhythm of the morning had been irrevocably altered. Around her, the base resumed its routine, yet there was an undeniable shift. Fellow guards glanced toward her occasionally, a subtle curiosity in their eyes, though none spoke aloud. Whispers began to ripple through the morning shift like a quietly spreading current. "Did you see that? Mills just saluted her. At the gate?" The words were hushed, respectful, tinged with disbelief. Sarah maintained her composure, executing her duties with the same meticulous care as always. Yet she could feel the quiet weight of recognition beginning to spread. Even the most senior officers on base began to take note. Rumors traveled fast, Commander Mills, known for his rigorous standards and quiet authority, had paused at the gate to acknowledge a guard who had demonstrated unwavering professionalism. No one expected a Navy SEAL commander of his reputation to salute someone so far from the front lines, yet here it had happened. The story was subtle but powerful. Validation not granted by rank, but earned through precision, discipline, and excellence. It was the kind of recognition that left an impression long after the moment had passed. Sarah felt the subtle change in the energy around her. Soldiers who passed through the gate gave slightly more respectful nods, a fraction more attention. In their posture, it wasn't overt admiration, but a quiet acknowledgement that she had done something extraordinary in her role. She realized that the ripple effect of Mills' gesture extended beyond herself. It had touched others, reminding them that professionalism, dedication, and attention to detail could be recognized, even in the most routine or overlooked positions. She reflected on the irony. For years, she had considered the gate a place of monotony, a duty often overlooked, a role far from the headlines or heroic tales of combat or strategy. And yet, in that quiet moment, her diligence had intersected with someone whose career had been defined by extraordinary courage, precision, and leadership. The salute had validated her years of service, her meticulous attention to detail, and her unwavering composure. And now, the effects rippled outward, touching everyone who observed or heard of the encounter. The ripple was subtle at first, almost imperceptible. A private gave a more attentive salute. A fellow guard straightened their posture a little more. Even officers passing through the checkpoint displayed a newfound respect for the procedures. Sarah executed daily. It was as though the base itself had acknowledged that excellence is not always flashy or celebrated, but it is always visible to those who recognize skill and professionalism. Sarah felt the weight of that realization, grounding her in both pride and humility. She allowed herself a brief smile. The recognition had transformed her morning, but it also reminded her of a broader truth. Even in positions far from the spotlight, excellence carries weight. Every ID scanned, every vehicle logged, every action taken with care and precision had meaning. Her role, once invisible, was now subtly elevated in the eyes of those who shared the base with her. And it was not recognition born of theatrics, but of genuine respect, the kind that arises when competence meets observation. Her mind wandered briefly to Commander Mills. He had not lingered unnecessarily, had not issued praise or accolades. There were no speeches, no ceremonies, no public acknowledgement, just the precise, deliberate gesture of a salute. And yet, that gesture had conveyed far more than any formal recognition could. Sarah understood then that respect is often earned and granted in quiet, profound moments. The salute had created ripples that extended far beyond the moment itself, touching morale, reinforcing standards, and inspiring those who witnessed or learned of it. As the morning shifted toward midday, Sarah noticed subtle changes in her interactions. Soldiers who previously rushed through the checkpoint now made an effort to present themselves properly. Colleagues glanced at her with renewed respect, sometimes exchanging subtle nods that acknowledged the extraordinary morning without words. Even those who had not witnessed the salute directly seemed to sense the ripple through stories and hushed conversations. The base felt subtly altered, a testament to the invisible impact of a single deliberate gesture executed with intention. Sarah continued her duties, scanning IDs and logging vehicles with precision, yet now each action carried an added weight of significance. Her hands moved with the same skill, her voice remained steady, but internally, she felt a sense of quiet empowerment. The validation from someone of Mill's caliber had altered not just her confidence, but her perception of her own role. It reinforced that professionalism, dedication, and vigilance are inherently valuable, even if recognition comes unexpectedly and silently. The ripple extended further than she imagined. Reports of the salute reached other parts of the base. Officers shared the story in meetings, mentors used it as an example to inspire younger soldiers, and whispers reached even the dining halls and barracks. Sarah realized that a single gesture of recognition could create an atmosphere of inspiration and aspiration. It reminded everyone that attention to detail, calm composure under scrutiny, and consistent professionalism were not just expected, they were respected, observed, and silently celebrated. Amid the subtle stir of acknowledgement, Sarah felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The morning had transformed from routine into an extraordinary moment of professional validation. She had been seen, not for rank or title, but for her competence, discipline, and calm efficiency. That recognition, small yet profound, became a touchstone of pride, reinforcing her commitment to excellence. The ripple it created spread beyond herself, altering interactions, inspiring others, and leaving an indelible mark on the culture of the base. As midday approached, Sarah found a quiet moment at her post. She reflected on the significance of what had occurred. Her position, often overlooked, had been transformed by one deliberate, intentional salute from a man whose judgment and standards were unparalleled. The ripple was subtle but profound, reaching soldiers, officers, and colleagues in ways she hadn't anticipated. It reminded her that professionalism and diligence, even in the smallest roles, are always meaningful, always visible to those who recognize skill. She returned her attention to the next vehicle, scanning the identification and logging the credentials with the same meticulous care as before. Yet now, there was an added calm in her movements, a quiet confidence that carried both validation and inspiration. Sarah understood that her performance mattered, not just to herself, but to the soldiers, colleagues, and even commanding officers who observed and benefited from her diligence. The morning had proven that excellence could inspire quietly, yet profoundly, creating ripples far beyond the moment itself. By the time the sun reached its zenith, the base had subtly shifted. Soldiers moved with more precision. Colleagues performed their duties with added awareness, and the ripple of Mill's acknowledgement continued to influence the daily rhythm. Sarah Thompson, once a quiet guardian of the gate, had become an example of professionalism in action. Her role, routine yet essential, had intersected with greatness, leaving a lasting impression on the base and everyone who passed through that checkpoint. By mid-afternoon, the ripple of Commander Mill's salute had traveled beyond the immediate confines of the checkpoint, reaching ears and eyes across the base. Sarah Thompson had returned to her routine, scanning IDs and logging vehicles, but she felt an unusual lightness in her movements, a quiet confidence born of acknowledgement. The discipline she had practiced daily for years now carried a new weight, validation not only of her diligence, but of her value in a system where routine often overshadowed individual skill. Word spread slowly but deliberately. A senior officer, passing through the gate, paused briefly, offering a nod that lingered a moment longer than usual. A fellow guard, previously indifferent to the mundane rhythm of routine checks, straightened their posture, eyes flicking toward Sarah with newfound respect. Even soldiers in the waiting area exchanged hushed murmurs about the morning's event, a subtle acknowledgement of her professionalism. Sarah noticed the shifts in demeanor without making a single word herself. Her work was now speaking for her in ways it never had before. Her thoughts drifted back to Commander Mills. The memory of his precise, deliberate salute replayed vividly in her mind, the weight of his recognition, the intensity of his gaze, and the unspoken respect conveyed in that simple gesture. She realized that the salute had done more than honor her professionalism. It had expanded the horizon of her influence. Now, even without realizing it, she was setting an example. Guards she had trained beside for years were subtly adjusting their behavior, modeling discipline and attention to detail after her actions. The ripple effect extended beyond the checkpoint. In the administrative offices, whispers of the event circulated among staff. Conversations in mess halls and barracks carried the story, spreading quietly from soldier to soldier, officer to officer. Sarah realized that the significance of her recognition went beyond personal pride. It had become a lesson in professionalism and consistency. Her performance, once routine and unnoticed, had become a tangible example of excellence under observation, demonstrating that diligence and composure could earn respect even in the smallest roles. Sarah felt a surge of reflection as she guided another convoy through the checkpoint. Every vehicle presented an opportunity to maintain precision, every interaction a chance to demonstrate competence. She approached each task with renewed focus, aware of the subtle attention she was receiving. Her actions now carried a dual purpose, fulfilling her duty and setting a quiet benchmark for others to follow. The morning had transformed her understanding of leadership, recognition, and responsibility. Excellence, she realized, is often contagious. It inspires others to meet the same standard, even without overt acknowledgement. By late afternoon, the commanding officers held a brief meeting near the main administrative building. Though Sarah wasn't formally invited, word of her encounter with Mills had reached them, and discussions of her professionalism filled the room. Some officers noted the precision of her actions, the calmness under scrutiny, and the subtle influence she had begun to exert on her peers. The conversation was careful, deliberate, reflective of the respect earned through her consistent performance. Her role, once considered routine, was now recognized as vital, both for operational efficiency and for morale. A few hours later, Sarah received an unexpected message through the internal communication system. A formal acknowledgement of her professionalism had been placed in her personnel file, accompanied by a brief commendation from her immediate supervisor. The words were simple yet powerful, demonstrated exceptional attention to detail and unwavering professionalism under observation by visiting Commander Mills. Recognition is warranted and well earned. Her pulse quickened as she read the note. It was official validation of something she had always known intuitively. Her work mattered, and it had been noticed. The acknowledgement carried emotional weight. Sarah felt a mixture of humility, pride, and motivation. She realized that recognition does not diminish responsibility. It amplifies it. She had always approached her duties with meticulous care, but now she felt a heightened sense of purpose. Every ID scanned, every log entry recorded, every interaction executed with precision was no longer solely about completing a task. It was about setting a standard, inspiring professionalism, and sustaining the respect she had earned. Even as the shadows lengthened across the base, Sarah remained at her post, a quiet sentinel of discipline. Soldiers passing through offered nods that were slightly longer than before. Guards adjusted their stances, and officers made brief comments that acknowledged her influence without overt fanfare. The ripple effect, subtle but powerful, had not only transformed her own perception of her role, but also elevated the behavior and morale of those around her. She had become a living example of the impact of dedication, attention, and composure. Sarah's thoughts wandered back to her career, the early mornings, the long shifts, the countless repetitions of tasks that often felt invisible. She realized that those moments of routine were not wasted. They had built the foundation that allowed her to excel under observation. Commander Mills' salute had been a catalyst, but the recognition was rooted in years of preparation, precision, and professionalism. The experience underscored a profound truth. Consistency and diligence eventually intersect with opportunity, and excellence, even in small roles, never goes unnoticed. The ripple extended beyond the physical base. Sarah began to notice subtle changes in how newcomers were trained and guided. Junior guards were encouraged to emulate her composure and attention to detail. Mentors highlighted her methods as a model for professionalism, illustrating that excellence is not only about visibility, but about influence. Her quiet example became a teaching tool, a blueprint for developing skill, discipline, and poise among new recruits. The influence of a single moment in acknowledgement by someone extraordinary had expanded far beyond what she could have imagined. By the end of her shift, Sarah felt a quiet, deep satisfaction. The day had been ordinary in some ways, yet extraordinary in impact. She had been recognized, subtly but profoundly, and her work had begun to inspire others without a word of proclamation. As she logged her final entries and prepared to leave her post, she understood the true weight of recognition. It validates, it motivates, and it inspires others to elevate their own standards. The ripple she had created would continue long after the salute, influencing the culture of professionalism and discipline across the base. As she walked away from her post, the sun dipping toward the horizon, Sarah felt a profound sense of accomplishment. The events of the morning had transformed her understanding of service, validation, and leadership. She had experienced recognition beyond the gate, witnessed its ripple effect, and realized that excellence, consistency, and composure have a power that extends far beyond individual roles. It was a quiet triumph, one that would shape not only her own approach, but also the expectations and inspiration of those around her for years to come. The days following Commander Mills' visit passed with a rhythm of routine, yet nothing felt ordinary to Sarah Thompson. Every vehicle that approached the checkpoint, every soldier that passed beneath her watchful gaze, carried the faint echo Of that morning, the memory of a precise, deliberate salute that had altered the trajectory of her perspective. She performed her duties with the same exacting precision as always, yet each action now carried an unspoken weight, the weight of recognition, validation, and the responsibility to uphold the standard that had been acknowledged. Sarah's interactions with her fellow guards subtly evolved. Junior soldiers, initially nervous or indifferent, sought her guidance, observing her posture, her meticulous scanning of IDs, her calm control under pressure. She taught them without overt authority, modeling professionalism through action rather than words. Her influence became quietly pervasive, instilling a culture of diligence and composure at the gate. What had begun as a solitary acknowledgement now rippled outward, shaping the behaviors and expectations of those around her. Sarah realized that her role, once perceived as routine, had become a benchmark of excellence. Across the base, the story of the salute continued to circulate. Officers and soldiers shared the account quietly, highlighting the subtle but profound lesson it carried. Excellence, discipline, and attention to detail do not go unnoticed, even in the most understated roles. Sarah understood the significance of this dissemination. Recognition was not about fame or ceremony. It was about creating a lasting influence, inspiring others to elevate their own performance, and demonstrating that even small gestures of professionalism can have far-reaching consequences. The ripple effect was tangible. Guards who had previously treated the gate as a mere checkpoint now approached their duties with renewed focus and care. Soldiers passing through became more disciplined, more aware, and more respectful of the procedures in place. Sarah observed these subtle shifts with quiet satisfaction, understanding that her diligence and composure had become a model for professionalism. She recognized that influence does not always arrive through directives or orders. It often emerges from consistent, exemplary conduct that inspires others to follow suit. Months passed, and the salute remained etched in Sarah's memory, a defining moment that shaped her understanding of recognition, leadership, and service. She reflected on the lessons it had imparted, that excellence requires consistency, that preparation enables opportunity, and that acknowledgement, even when delivered quietly, carries profound weight. Her role at the gate had transformed from routine to remarkable, not because her duties changed, but because her performance had intersected with someone capable of seeing and validating it. One afternoon, a new cohort of recruits arrived for training. Sarah was assigned to demonstrate procedures at the gate, guiding the young soldiers through scanning protocols, security checks, and communication procedures. As she instructed them, she could see in their eyes the same uncertainty and hesitation she had once felt. Yet as she moved with precision, executing each step flawlessly, the recruits began to mirror her posture, her attention to detail, and her calm demeanor. Sarah realized that her influence, rooted in competence and quiet professionalism, was being passed forward, shaping the next generation of guards. The base command eventually recognized her formally, offering commendations for her exemplary conduct and the subtle leadership she demonstrated at the gate. Yet the accolades, while meaningful, did not define her sense of achievement. Sarah's true fulfillment came from the understanding that her professionalism had become a standard, a quiet yet powerful legacy of influence. She understood that recognition, once granted, carries responsibility to maintain excellence, to inspire others, and to ensure that the standard endures. Sarah continued her duties with unwavering focus. Each morning, as vehicles approached and IDs were scanned, she was reminded of the morning when Commander Mills had halted his steps, raised his hand, and acknowledged her skill. That memory became a guiding principle, reinforcing the importance of every gesture, every procedure, every moment of composure. She realized that the smallest acts of discipline, when executed consistently, have the potential to shape perceptions, inspire behavior, and leave lasting impressions on those around. Over time, Sarah noticed how the culture at the gate had transformed. Junior guards demonstrated more attention to detail. Veterans approached each task with renewed awareness, and the overall efficiency and professionalism of the checkpoint had improved markedly. What began as a single salute had evolved into a legacy of competence and influence. Sarah felt a quiet pride, knowing that her dedication, acknowledged at a pivotal moment, had inspired tangible improvements and cultivated an atmosphere of excellence. In private moments, Sarah reflected on the intangible lessons of recognition and influence. She understood that leadership is not always about issuing commands. It is often about setting examples, demonstrating discipline, and allowing others to learn through observation. Mill's salute had been brief, unceremonious, yet its impact was enduring. It had validated her efforts, affirmed her professionalism, and set in motion a ripple effect that extended far beyond the checkpoint, affecting soldiers, colleagues, and the culture of the base itself. As the sun set over the base, casting long shadows across the asphalt and illuminating the guard towers, Sarah Thompson paused at her post. She felt a deep sense of accomplishment, a quiet awareness that her work, performed with precision and care, had meaning beyond the immediate tasks. She understood that recognition, once granted, is not a momentary honor. It is a catalyst for influence, a measure of professionalism, and a seed that cultivates excellence in others. Years later, the memory of that salute remained a cornerstone of Sarah's career. She continued to serve at the gate, but the lessons endured. The power of silent acknowledgement, the influence of consistent professionalism, and the subtle yet profound ways in which competence can inspire others. She often recounted the story to junior soldiers, not to boast, but to illustrate the importance of diligence, focus, and maintaining composure under observation. The salute had become more than a personal memory. It was a legacy, a teaching, tool, and a symbol of the enduring value of excellence. In the quiet moments at her post, Sarah Thompson reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point, the long hours, the routine, the careful execution of duties often unnoticed, and the singular moment when Commander Mills had recognized her skill. That salute had transformed her perception of service, inspired others, and created a ripple of influence that reshaped the culture at the gate. She had learned that true recognition is not measured in words, accolades, or ceremonies. It is measured in respect, influence, and the enduring impact of professionalism executed with integrity. Sarah's legacy, built quietly through consistent excellence and acknowledged in a single moment of recognition, endured far beyond her immediate actions. The base continued to operate with heightened discipline. The guards upheld the standard she had exemplified, and the culture of professionalism continued to grow. The salute had not only validated her service, but had created a lasting imprint on the environment, the people, and the culture she served. It was a testament to the enduring power of recognition, precision, and silent leadership. As the stars began to emerge over the base that evening, Sarah Thompson stood at her post one final time for the day. The memory of the salute remained vivid, a guiding principle, and a source of quiet strength. She understood that excellence is often unnoticed until it intersects with the eyes of those who recognize it. Her journey had shown her that every action, no matter how small, carries potential for impact, and that true recognition has the power to inspire, elevate, and create a legacy that outlasts the moment itself. Sarah's work at the gate continued, unchanged in task, but transformed in purpose. She had been seen, recognized, and validated, and in doing so, had become a beacon of professionalism, diligence, and quiet leadership. The legacy of that salute would endure, shaping the culture, inspiring others, and serving as a reminder that even the smallest gestures, when executed with integrity, can leave an extraordinary mark on the world.